Good evening, I'm Leanne Sanders. Welcome to APTN National News. The man convicted in the manslaughter death of Barbara Kentner in Thunder Bay has been released on day parole. According to an August 10th parole board decision, Brayden Bushby was granted day parole for 6 months after just over 2 years into an 8-year sentence. Bushby threw a metal trailer hitch from a moving vehicle that hit the Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation woman in the abdomen in 2017. He was found guilty of manslaughter in December 2020. Conditions of his release include staying away from alcohol, not contacting Kentner's family, and following a treatment plan. He admitted to being intoxicated at the time, and evidence showed he said, "I got one," after hitting her. Melissa Kentner, Barbara's sister, said the decision felt like a slap in the face. Quote, "He should have stayed in prison like others there do time, and yet he gets to walk the streets as if nothing happened." We will bring you more on this story as it develops. The woman accusing a former New Democrat MP of sexual assault is going public. Former Quebec politician Romeo Saganash was charged earlier this summer by Winnipeg police. And today, Carmen Roy says she's speaking out to support others. CTV's Manitoba Bureau Chief Jill Makashon reports.
Initially, the only name made public in the court documents was his. Romeo Saganash, a prominent Indigenous politician and lawyer, a residential school survivor who worked to establish the rights of Indigenous peoples around the world at the United Nations. Saganash is accused of sexual assault, and the alleged victim, Carmen Roy, who could have had her identity protected by a court publication ban, is instead making her name public. "I don't want to be silent," she said in a statement issued through her lawyer, "and I think it's important to use my voice to help other victims of sexual trauma. I am exploring my legal options and look forward to achieving justice and accountability." Roy works at the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. Saganash was also connected to the organization. The director of the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation said she supports Roy's courage. "We are deeply concerned that an incident took place at an off-site event where NCTR staff were present. That incident is now before the courts." A Winnipeg police statement alleges the sexual assault occurred at the beginning of May. Saganash was arrested at the end of June. Saganash's lawyer said these allegations are new and legal work is just beginning. He said Romeo Saganash will speak eventually in a statement through his lawyer. Jill Makashon, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Last week, the Nunavut government issued an update for tuberculosis in the community of Pangnirtung. There have now been 40 active and 187 latent cases of TB in the community since the outbreak was declared in 2021. It's one of 3 outbreaks in the territory, which also includes Pond Inlet and Nunavut. According to the federal government, the rate of tuberculosis in Inuit communities is about 300 times that of non-Indigenous Canadians. The rate among First Nations communities is estimated to be 40 times higher. Overcrowded homes, food insecurity, other illnesses, and smoking contribute to the spread of TB. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is September 30th, and APTN will be holding a special live event. Last year, APTN was one of the host broadcasters of Remembering the Children in Ottawa, and we will be hosting another event this year. To look back and talk about what's coming up, Daryl Stranger spoke to the co-host of APTN News Nation to Nations, Annette Francis.
Annette, thanks so much for being here. It's always great to be able to speak with you. We'll start with a look back at last year. What do you remember of that day a year ago, and what were some of the things that you were doing?
I was reporting on the march that day. I remember it was the opening ceremony was on Parliament Hill in front of Centre Block. It started about 10 o'clock that morning, and there was a lot. There were hundreds of orange shirts in the crowd for the opening ceremony. There was a opening prayer. There were speeches and performers. before they took off and did the 2-kilometer walk.
Well, speaking of the walk, what was the mood like of the people who marched from Parliament Hill down to LeBreton Flats?
Well, I've been covering marches for years here in Ottawa, and this one was really quiet. It was the most somber march I've been to. There were youth, there were children, there were elders, and a lot of them, some of them quite emotional.
Mm-hmm. And Annette, what's changed maybe since the last year, over the last year, and with that, what can we expect this time around come September 30th?
There will be no march this year. This year it will be held in front of West Block on Parliament Hill. It'll be broadcast live. It'll be the same hosts as last year, different residential school survivors and performers and artists as well.
All right, well, we'll certainly look forward to that, as well as our coverage of this September 30th, which I'm sure will be just as good as all the previous coverage. So, Annette, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much. It was great being able to speak with you. Miigwech.
Miigwech.
We have to take a break. When we come back, a new report paints a grim picture of what Indigenous youth are facing in Canada. Welcome back. A new report released this week paints a grim outlook for Indigenous youth in our country. They are disproportionately impacted by all of the identified threats to children. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
Tuesday's release of the 6th annual Raising Canada report shows young people in Canada have it hard. Children First Canada worked with the University of Calgary, University of Toronto, and McGill University and conducted research with youth, parents, and experts. Across the country, half of Canadian youth experienced depression during the pandemic. Child violence, poverty, and racism have all seen increases from last year. And Indigenous youth are seeing the highest levels. Sarah Austin is the founder and CEO of Children First Canada.
And it's clear in this report that the data is showing that First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children are disproportionately impacted by all the top 10 threats to children. Starting with the top threat, preventable injuries are the leading cause of death for all children, but Indigenous youth are disproportionately impacted. Indigenous young people make up only 3% of the pediatric population, yet 30% of fatalities from preventable injuries.
Austin says lack of quick medical care is a key issue that needs immediate attention.
It's more than just what might be happening in a home. It's really, these are systemic issues. We know that young people, Indigenous young people, are far less likely to have access to timely medical care in their community and face systemic barriers to their access to good quality health care, even in urban settings.
The report shows that solutions do exist and need to be implemented.
But this really is a matter of political will. We know that for decades now, the rights of Indigenous children have been gravely overlooked and significantly neglected. And these are issues that are timely and require urgent action by the federal and provincial governments. We need to see these issues treated with the level of gravity and concern that they require.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
We have to step away, but when we return, we'll hear about a Mi'kmaq couple taking part in the Amazing Race. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. This great shot comes from our very own Tamara Pimentel. She was out in Broken Head First Nation for a story on food security and how university students are growing corn and other vegetables for the community. Send your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Fredericton 22 tomorrow and Halifax 20. Northern Quebec, we've got La Grande River at 19 and Happy Valley Goose Bay 16. Val-d'Or 24 and Montreal 26. 27 in Peterborough, Toronto and London tomorrow. Northern Ontario, Big Trout Lake 28 and Sioux Lookout 29. Northern Manitoba, we've got Churchill at 21 tomorrow and The Paw 26. A warm day tomorrow in Gimli, Winnipeg 34. And in Saskatchewan, also warm. Regina looking at 32 tomorrow and North Battleford 29. Further north, Uranium City 18, La Ronge 25. Northern Alberta, Fort Chip 20, Peace River and Grand Prairie 21 tomorrow. Calgary 27 and Red Deer 30. Southern BC, Kamloops 28 and Campbell River 27. Dease Lake 19 and Fort Nelson 26. Old Crow 14, Dawson, Beaver Creek and Mayo 11. Northwest Territories, Wrigley and Wati 17. Anuvik 14 and Colville Lake 11. Cambridge Bay 4 tomorrow, Baker Lake 12. Arctic Bay 3 and Iqaluit 6. We now have more on the story about how Indigenous youth are disproportionately impacted by social and economic circumstances. Founder and CEO of Children First Canada, Sarah Austin, joined Daryl Stranger earlier this week.
Sarah, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to speak with us. How did this new report come about?
Thanks so much for having me, Daryl. The Raising Canada report is published annually by Children First Canada in partnership with the University of Calgary, University of Toronto, and McGill University. We really want to take a look at the state of the nation's children, the top 10 threats to kids in Canada, and look at the challenges that kids face from coast to coast to coast. We look at what's happening in the lives of all 8 million kids in Canada, but we also do a deep dive around what's happening in the lives of particular populations of children. And I'm really looking forward to talking with you about the particular impacts of the top 10 threats on Indigenous children and the real challenges they face, but also the opportunities to make life better for them and for their peers.
Mm-hmm. So just on that topic, Sarah, what were the findings with regard to Indigenous children specifically?
Now, what's really concerning in this new data is that Indigenous children are much more likely than their non-Indigenous peers to be injured, become ill, or die from preventable causes. Preventable and unintentional injuries are the leading cause of death for all children, things like choking, falls, and drowning, but also, related to, accidents related to recreational drugs. And these are systemic issues. This is not an issue of a parent or a child making poor decisions. These are the impacts of colonialism, the legacy of residential schools that are making these children much greater risk. The Indigenous children represent only 3% of the pediatric population, but they're 30% of child fatalities related to preventable injuries. It's really concerning. I think many parents would be concerned to hear that, because we all want to ensure that our kids have a safe and healthy start at life. And these are things that are entirely preventable, and we need better laws in place, better supports for parents to ensure our kids not only survive but thrive.
Mm-hmm. Concerning indeed, Sarah, and just sort of in turn with that, what's needed to curb the threats to Indigenous kids within Canada?
Well, this really is a matter of political priority. We know that the federal government has pledged to forge better relationships with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, to honor the commitments under the UN Declaration on Indigenous Peoples and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. But we're not seeing this treated with the level of urgency that's really required. Children's lives are on the line. There's a great sense of urgency that Indigenous children are much more likely to grow up in poverty, to experience abuse, and other forms of adversity that not only impact them in their early years, but throughout their lifetime. We need our government to step up and ensure that Indigenous children receive equitable resources for their education, education, for healthcare, and for all the supports that families need to provide the very basics of life, let alone to allow our children to prosper.
Well, Sarah, given everything you've just said and with this report, what should happen next here?
But we're calling on the federal and provincial governments to make a plan to put children first, to lead Forum with Children, having a national strategy for children, appointing a federal commissioner, and investing big, bold resources to ensure that kids survive and thrive. But we also want to see children being raised with their rights. Canada has an obligation to teach children that they have rights and to engage them as responsible citizens. We know that kids who know their rights are less likely to be bullied or to bully others. They're more likely to seek help if they experience abuse or neglect. But they're also more empowered to be involved in decision-making within their families, their communities, and to speak up even at the highest levels of government. These are simple steps that our government can and should be taking, and we urge them to act with a sense of urgency.
Well, there's certainly plenty to think about there, Sarah. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much again for coming on our show and giving us a little insight into this report.
Thank you.
A Mi'kmaq couple from eastern Quebec competed in the Amazing Race Canada this past spring. The show's still airing, and as of right now, they're still in the game. Amelia Fournier met up with them to talk about their experience.
Amanda LaRocque and Devin Kondo Mitchell are used to pushing themselves to their limits. But it was a whole other level competing on the Amazing Race.
If you want to test your relationship and you want to see if you're going to make it, I mean, join the Amazing Race because it's going to test you at every level imaginable.
Devin and Amanda live in Geskabegia, where Devin works as a conservation officer and Amanda works as the head of public health of the community.
They're turning around.
Why?
They were able to put themselves to the test in a race across the country, which Devin said helped him grow.
Get out of your comfort zone. It only makes you stronger, and that's the only way you're going to grow in life, is whenever you're uncomfortable.
When she's not working or spending time with Devin and her 2 kids, Amanda is a traditional powwow dancer.
We had a couple dance challenges so far, tree dancing and swing dancing. I think that helped a lot, knowing the basics, I would say, but that helped me. My dance helped me, actually.
They were able to use their adventurous spirit and traditional teachings to make it through the race.
We come from a nation of resilience. You know, we've survived colonization. You know, we're still thriving today. We still have the language. You know, I can speak my language that's been under colonization for over 500 years.
Devin and Amanda say their experience on the show made them stronger as a couple.
We just persevered and became stronger as we went, because we started to work on our communication skills and we knew how to talk to each other, and the weaknesses started to show and we picked on that. And we just, after every leg, we would just conversate on like, how can we better ourselves throughout this race and get stronger together.
Devin, who is originally from the neighboring community of Listugush, says that he felt proud to be part of the first Mi'kmaq team to compete in the race.
It's a huge responsibility because we're representing a whole nation of Mi'kmaq people, and we don't want to do our people wrong and stuff like that, and we just tried the best that we could.
Amanda and Devin have received overwhelming support from their communities and some light teasing.
The only thing I'm getting is like, I hope you have an amazing evening, or I hope you have an amazing way home. So they'll throw roadblock jokes and detour jokes.
She noticed that we were First Nations, and she said she was honored for us to be running the race.
Amanda and Devin said they felt supported by First Nations across the country.
The love and support that we're getting from Turtle Island right now is absolutely unbelievable, and we're super grateful for that.
It's a delicate balance as teams hang on for a spot in the semifinals.
You can catch Amanda and Devin competing on the Amazing Race on CTV Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Amelia Fournier, APTN National News, Geskabegia, Quebec.
Well, good luck to them. Anuvik is the hub of the most northern wrestling entertainment, and it is Indigenous founded and led. For 4 years now, 3 Inuvialuit men have been growing that momentum. Carly Jogner has more from their last performance last weekend.
Kids screaming the names of alter ego wrestlers can be heard outside Anuvik's Friendship Center.
What did you think of this event?
It was cool, funny. That guy was mean.
anybody you cheer for?
This one.
Polar bear? Yeah. From Tuck? Yeah? What's it about why you cheer for Polar bear?
Because he looks strong.
A land-based coordinator and firefighter by day, Noel Lee Cockney joined the co-founders nearly 4 years ago. For him, it's about incorporating his Inuvialuit culture.
It's so much fun. Like, it's really brings me back to like watching wrestling growing up and getting that excitement going and like seeing that and like literally being in the ring, whether doing moves on someone or someone's doing moves on me and like hearing them cheer. It's like really, it's exciting. It's really fun. I've been out on the land like most of my life. So that's why like with my wrestling gear, like I have the hide belt with Nola Bear on it. I have my mucklucks that I wear in the ring to really be able to bring our tradition, the Inuit traditions, into this event because it's very unique and like you don't see that anywhere else. I think like being able to bring a lot of eyes eventually farther up here and just bring more people up for bigger shows.
Since June 2019, they've been developing wrestling content and hosting shows in person and online. They've been expanding their audience and bringing wrestlers up, including last year a wrestler from New Jersey.
Welcome Anuvik, here is Cheeseburger!
If there was ever options for girls, would you ever want to try doing something like this?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We've been looking for female wrestlers. We want to bring female wrestlers up and actually wrestle each other in front of the kids. So we're working on that. Man, woman, child, well, teenagers, I guess. If you want to train to be a pro wrestler and you live around the Anuvik area, please give us a call.
Saturday night Scout-in. Let me hear the noise.
The co-founder says he's motivated to create more opportunity and spotlight for the region.
The biggest part for me has definitely been the community feedback in that you hear from these kids in the street, at the store, are you the Eskimo-fo? Are you Destro? You were in Taw. And I'm like, yeah. And when I had the belt, they were calling me champ. People ask me now why I don't have it. But I think really the biggest thing is the connection, to the families, to the kids. We're seeing now, there's a generation of children now in Anuvik that are growing up with pro wrestling in their community. These are core memories they're making with their parents. So now we're helping to bring pro wrestling to this place that it's never been before. Being a Inuvialuit for me and being able to showcase a bit of what we have here in Totally Arctic Wrestling has been really important. We use a drum instead of a bell to start our matches, so you'll hear a traditional drum being hit. And I even want to go as far as doing a Dausik Malaruk Pingahut for our counts, 1, 2, 3. So that's something we're going to be introducing soon too.
Proceeds from Saturday's match went towards Lorene's Family Pancreatic Cancer Fund. Carly Schogner, APTN National News, Nunavut.
My back just hurts looking at that. That's all the time we have for you tonight. If you want to see these stories and more, head over to aptnnews.ca. Have a great evening.